One thing that can drain the life out of a marriage faster than just about anything is constantly fighting.
Does that describe your marriage? If it does, we want to encourage you. Hope is definitely not lost. I know it may feel like you can't get out of the rut you're in, but you can with a lot of love and grace. We know this because we've had to learn how to do it ourselves. And we learned the hard way, but we did learn.
We did.
So if you're married, you're stuck in this cycle, I want you to take a deep breath. Grab a cup of coffee, because we're about to talk all about this right now on the Anything Together podcast.
We've for sure been there. We've even been there recently.
Let's just say this topic is really fresh for us.
If you're married, you've had arguments. Disagreements are going to happen. But what we want to talk about is when you get into this consistent pattern of fighting. We can go through seasons in our marriage that can be really difficult. It can become super exhausting, and it can wear you down quickly. But the ideas that we want to talk about in this episode are about preventing these seasons and patterns of fighting, because they can really tear down your relationship if they're left unchecked.
Yeah. And listen, we know there aren't any fix-alls for every single marriage. All of our suggestions are just based on our own experiences, and they aren't meant to be taken as professional advice. We know that some of you may be going through much deeper, more problematic issues in your marriage. And for those situations, we just strongly suggest you seek professional Christian counseling, especially if you're in an abusive marriage. So we just want to be sensitive to that and recognize it right here at the beginning of the episode.
But we do have a few strategies that we've learned ourselves, and we hope that they'll help you stop the constant fighting in your marriage. So let's go.
Let's do it.
Our first strategy is be slow to speak. That I kind of struggle with that one. Can't imagine.
So James 1:19 says, "My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry." Man, in the heat of the moment, it is too easy to let your emotions get away from you. I know it feels almost impossible to keep that dam from busting open, but here's a suggestion. Pray about it. Ask God to help you change your response to your spouse. And when you have a disagreement or you have hurt feelings, try to start off by focusing on the fact that your responses are entirely your choice. You need to stay in control of your emotions. And that takes being really intentional with it and deliberate about it. It's actually almost a mechanical switch you have to make in your head that gets you out of the emotions. Because here's the thing. At the start of an argument, right out of the gate, your wife or your husband might come at you with some insulting remarks from out of their own lack of self-control. But it's completely your choice how you react to it. You can just sit there in silence listening. I should say you should just sit there in silence listening. Because the truth of what's really upsetting them usually comes out right after the mudslinging.
And try listening to your spouse's complaints without planning your response. Really listen to them. Hear everything they're saying, even if it's sounding a little insulting or offensive.
Yeah.
Be patient and intentional and allow them to completely express themselves. Sometimes just hearing ourselves verbalize our own frustrations helps us figure out the solution right in the moment, or helps us see how we might be reacting the wrong way. I know I sometimes do that, where I say it out loud and I'm like, okay, actually, I think I might be the problem. So then when they've finished, just pause. Don't have a look on your face. Don't have that look. Be thoughtful and consider what they've said to you before you respond. It may seem just impossible to do this at first, but you know what? You can do more than you think you can. Again, just pray about it and ask God to help you with your responses. Help them to be more loving and more thoughtful. You have more capacity to love, to be patient, to respond softly and carefully than you probably even think you can.
Yeah.
And it's not just you, it's Christ in you that can help you to do this. And this sort of careful response is the beginning of rewriting the rules for how you and your husband or your wife handle your disagreements. This is where it starts to improve. Each time you take the opportunity to just pause and take control of your reactions, you'll increase your ability to control your emotions, and you'll avoid responding in anger. We should always carefully consider what we will say to the love of our life. So pause. Think about your end goal here. Is it simply to win, or can it be to add peace to your life together? Some of you just said, yep, it's definitely to win. And yeah, we can relate to that too. We've been married a while, but our goal should really be to add peace to our marriage and to grow closer together, to have a marriage that reflects our relationship with the Lord and points people to Him. Yeah. So maybe keeping this end goal in mind would be helpful.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, our next suggestion is to be aware of your own sinfulness. You've heard the saying, it takes two to tango. Well, obviously arguing happens between two people. And no matter how innocent you feel you've been at times, some of the fault for the season of arguing you're in may fall on you. It's kind of inevitable, actually. We chose the word sinfulness in this section, and what we really mean is that you have to be aware of how you're impacting your marriage in negative ways. And that's your own internal work right there. In order to stop chronic fighting, you both have to be willing to take a hard, honest look at yourself. And that willingness has to then move past that to making some necessary changes for the sake of your marriage, if need be.
So since you're listening to this podcast or watching it, you may be in a place where you want to stop fighting with your spouse. Sometimes couples like us, we can get into a rut where it seems like there's just nothing we can do right, and we're just at each other. But you're both tired of fighting. And you're both probably wanting peace back in your relationship, because no matter who is at fault, both spouses are now miserable, having so much conflict going on. And so the longer it goes on, the bigger and more destructive our thoughts can be. And we begin to entertain questions like, does he really love me? And are we even compatible? And the worst one, is this even worth it? So the sooner you take actions to stop that conflict, the better. But we want to tell you there's hope, even when it feels hopeless. Yeah. But where do you start? In our relationship, it always takes looking directly at ourselves. What am I doing? What am I going through in my own personal life? And is that affecting my ability to be understanding and loving? Am I immediately reacting instead of listening? For me, I always need to take a look at my tone of voice, because even without realizing it, I can sometimes sound sarcastic or snarky. I bet you wouldn't even guess that, right? Me? Maybe you have a habit that drives a wedge between you and your spouse, and you need to take a look at how you can maybe change that. Or it may be that you each have some differences that need to be worked out, and that's going to take some open communication. Whatever it is, you've got to try and honestly look at yourself and see if you could be causing at least part of the problem. This is something that Wayne is really good at. He has helped us out of many a rut over the years. You are really good at that self-reflective thing.
Thank you. But there's a passage in the Bible that's really convicted me recently, because we went through this ourselves. It was the first time in a while that we had to put some of these things into practice. And the verse that got me was Philippians 2:14. It's super short and to the point, and it says, do everything without complaining and arguing. It doesn't say do this without complaining or do that without arguing. It says do everything without complaining or arguing. It got me because so much of the negativity I bring to our marriage comes through those two things, complaining and arguing. And those things really point to an attitude problem. And it just made me realize, how can I draw closer to you, to work with you, to bring peace back into our marriage if I have a bad attitude? And that attitude is exactly the thing that's producing the issues we're trying to stop. I don't always get this right. She can attest to that. It's not even close. But I do find that if I search myself, I search my Bible, and then I pray for answers on where I'm going wrong in my character and my behavior, that God uses it to help me see the things that I need to change.
One thing I want to mention is that sometimes our sinfulness can really mean the life or death of our marriage. And so if there's something that you're hanging on to that is harmful to your marriage or your spouse or yourself, We want to urge you to take steps to destroy that immediately.
Yes.
And step back into a place of fighting for your spouse and not against them.
So true. Okay, so next strategy. Avoid difficult discussions through texting. Oh boy. Have you ever had the dreaded experience of having a text argument with your spouse?
Yes.
Me too. They get me so mad, so irritated, so fast. Now, that's my strong, opinionated take on it. My girl over here has a little different way of looking at it, so I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say about it. But for me, texting is just so one-dimensional that it challenges me in a few different ways. When you text somebody, you can't fully understand their emotions. You can't see their nonverbal expressions. You don't have the benefit of seeing them talking or seeing the looks on their face, which to me is a really important part of communication.
You're glad you don't see the looks on my face
I'm
when
sure
we're
I am. But despite the challenges, texting really can be a time saver. And I realize a lot of people highly prefer texting over calling someone on the phone. So I'm not suggesting a full stop on all texting. I'm just saying there are conversations that maybe are better face to face. But I do want to hear your thoughts on it.
I agree with that. And there are times that I don't mind calling if it's something that I really need to get. If I really need to get the tone of voice and the nuance. So yeah, I agree with you there. Right. But I really like being able to think before I send something. And I personally kind of have a hard time thinking on the spot if I'm in a conversation. So it gives me that opportunity to just think of what I'm talking about before I send it. I can carefully choose my words, and I prefer that. I read a text over probably 6 or 7 times before I send it. Well,
really?
Usually.
Wow.
If it's important. And so it gives me the opportunity to do that. I can breathe before responding and not be so impulsive. And so I like that. The other person can't see the look on my face with my eyes rolling, because that might make it worse. So you avoid that. And it helps with being slow to speak, because I can't text as fast as I can talk. And so it forces me to take that extra few moments and think through my reaction. However, I do know that there are times and situations that sitting across from each other and having a conversation is definitely necessary. So things like big life-altering problems, decisions, something that maybe has caused a lack of trust between you. If there's a need to really connect, we would definitely say avoid the phone and meet at the kitchen table or on the couch when the kids go to bed, or in your bedroom, and have a real conversation.
That's good.
So yeah.
Yeah, since I really hate the whole roller coaster of fighting in text, it's always like my intention to stop a conversation that feels like it's about to go off the rails.
Yeah.
But stopping it is way harder than it sounds. So if you're like me and that stuff really bothers you, what you can do is control your side of it. Avoid texting difficult things to one another. And difficult is relative, right? So my suggestion is to avoid topics like hurt feelings, insecurities, and definitely avoid confessions over the phone, especially. Save those talks for when you're together. Facial expressions and tones of voice are important. And in my opinion, you just need to see each other's face for talks like that. And look, if you're like Leanne, well, I'm sorry. You're just wrong.
Okay. Moving on. Our next idea is to establish boundaries for arguing. The primary motivation for a person in an argument or a fight is usually to prove that they are right. It's human nature.
Yep, it is.
And things can get so heated that we fall back to this sort of primal, instinctive, defeat your opponent kind of mentality. And it just never ends well, especially when you're arguing with your spouse.
So true.
This is why it's so important to establish some rules or boundaries for arguing in your marriage. Mm-hmm. And that may sound a little strange, but hear me out. It can really make a difference if you both commit to holding to the rules.
But what do we mean by that? What kind of boundaries or rules can you set for arguing? Well, here are some ideas. The first idea applies to the hotheads. If you're someone like me who loses their temper easily, man, you've got to step out of the room to vent your anger. No more blowing up on your spouse. That is not allowed. You both have to agree not to venture heated anger on each other. So go out, sit in your car, or just go out in the backyard and yell at your dadgum grass. But whatever you do, don't do
Dadgum grass.
Don't do it where they can hear you.
That's true too.
The whole point is to do
it
it privately so that your wife or husband cannot hear you at all.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
And try to put yourself into a mindset that you're training yourself. You're training yourself not to blow up on your spouse. It takes that. Get it all out. Talk yourself down. And then make a pact with yourself to always do it like this. Because the person you love the most in this world does not deserve to take the brunt of that nonsense, no matter what happened. And if you're consistent with it, eventually it'll become second nature to do this instead of blowing up on them. And who knows, maybe you find that after a while, you don't even need to blow up or vent at all.
I'm still thinking about you yelling at the grass. What are our neighbors going to think? That is hilarious, but not a bad idea. Another advice is to carefully explain what it is that's upsetting you. Just talk plainly. You don't have to add all the extra emotion. Just this is what is upsetting me. Yeah. And it's probably best if you do it after you've calmed down completely so that you don't have all the extra emotion. You should be very intentional with how you say this. Yeah. The key here is to not let your emotions get away from you. The goal is to communicate. Keep the goal in mind. It is to communicate, not to show them how upset you are, not to win a fight, but to communicate. The boundaries are designed to pull back the emotional exchanges and push forward effective communication and resolution.
That's really good. And our last idea is to suggest a way that your spouse can make things better or how they can do things differently next time to avoid upsetting you. And this is probably the most constructive thing you can do to stop the fight cycle. There have been so many times where I was entirely unaware that what I was saying or what I was doing was upsetting you. Unaware. And your suggestions in those moments truly helped me to know you better. They helped me avoid making that honest mistake again. I think so often the person who's hurt or is upset assumes that the offender is offending on purpose. And don't get me wrong, I mean, that happens. In either case, the offender is given a really good opportunity to change by simply helping them understand what happened and how they can avoid it in the future. Yeah. It's a win-win for sure.
There's a chapter in the Bible called the Love chapter. And it's called that because it describes what love should look like in very practical terms. 1 Corinthians 13, 4-7. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no records of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Practice loving your husband or your wife like this and pray for the Lord's help and involvement in your marriage. God is faithful, and He will cover and protect your marriage. Just ask Him to.
Yeah, amen.
The next strategy is to submit to each other out of reverence for Christ.
Boy, that word probably throws people off. Submit to each other out of reverence for Christ. This is what Paul told married believers in his letter to the Ephesians. God wants you to submit. Another word for it is to yield to your spouse. Submit to each other, he says, out of reverence for Jesus. Now, I want to offer a reminder here real quick. Remember, our suggestions do not apply to abusive marriages. If you're in one of those, please seek professional help. Yeah. But to our married friends just struggling to get along, submit yourself to your spouse. Put yourself second and always consider them first. It's a big challenge, but do it.
In Ephesians 5, Paul goes on to explain that wives should submit to their husbands as the church submits to Christ, and that husbands should love their wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. Gosh, can you just imagine how difficult it will become for you to argue when you're deliberately and selflessly and lovingly submitting or yielding yourself to each other? Our last suggestion, and we do highly suggest this, is submit to one another in physical intimacy as well.
Yeah. She means sex.
Well, seriously though, we've experienced this ourselves when we've gone through some tough seasons in our marriage. Yes, increasing your physical connection strengthens your emotional connection, and that is healing and life-giving to a marriage. God designed sex for pleasure and for a spiritual bond within a marriage.
That's right. And according to 1 Corinthians 7:5, consistent physical intimacy actually helps you both keep from sinning against each other, and it keeps you from temptations outside of your marriage. So you can't neglect that part of your relationship.
So if you're married and you're fighting a lot, know that you are not alone. Most married couples have gone through exactly the same season that you're in now. Remember, if you don't know what to do, God has revealed his plan to us in his word. Seek help at your church or with couples who have been there before you, and remember who you're fighting with. That person is the love of your life. Choose them over the conflict every time. Fight for them, not against them.
Yes. And if something we've said has given you some good ideas for resolving conflict, or if you have something to add to the conversation, please leave a comment below.
Yeah.
Let us know your thoughts. We definitely want to hear from you. We value your input. And please like, subscribe, and share our content. It really means a lot to us, and it's super helpful to us when you do that. And remember this, you're going to have trouble in this life. But if you pray through it, and if you hold on to each other, and you stay committed to each other no matter what, you can get through anything together.